Hello, this is Samuel Scriven, and you're listening to This American Scribe, sponsored by Poe's O's, Harvard University, and Henry David Thoreau's mom, who sincerely wishes her son would stop telling people his name in the wrong order. Today we have a very special episode. Today we go along with our correspondent David Buck to the American Writers' Convention. This year's convention is filled to the brim with amazing writers, even some that are back from the dead, who have gathered here this weekend to discuss writing and philosophy, and to advertise their new works. We go live now to Mr. Buck, who just ran into a very famous author.
Mr. Ralph Waldo Emerson. I'm a huge fan. How are you doing on this fine literary day? The sun is shining, the birds are chirping. I'd say it's a wonderful day. Which is to say I'm fine. Thank you, sir. And how do you fare yourself? I'm fine. Thank you. Very fine. And I'm glad to hear you are too. So what is your booth featuring? Transcendentalism, being close to nature, smoothies, you know, the works. How do you think the transcendentalist idea has come across to the people who have seen your booth? Not as well as I would like. I think perhaps my ideas are too profound at the moment, but Thoreau does seem to have more of a following, even with relatively similar ideas. What made you feel so strongly that transcendentalism was the way to go? I believe that was when I went to England in 1847. I saw the industrial buildings and all of the smoke. God, there was so much smoke. And the class divide. This is when I started my lectures on natural history of intellect. And I'm currently writing my book, English Traits. Very cool. Say, what do you think about Harriet Beecher Stowe's booth? It seems to be generating quite the stir at this conference. I read a bit of her work. I absolutely agree with her message. The perpetuation of slavery is an evil that deprives a large portion of America and its free thinking and free will. This will not do. Transcendentalists such as myself want individuals of all races and genders to be able to think for themselves, unburdened by others. I see. It was good talking to you, Mr. Emerson. Boy, it's stifling in this convention center. I need to step outside for some fresh air. Oh, what a surprise. Henry David Thoreau is out here.
Why, hello, good sir.
What are you doing out here? Why is your whole booth set up outside the convention hall? Are you lost?
Quite the opposite. I am found. That is, I've found my sense of individualism in this great country. I refuse to pay my entrance fee to the convention because my actions and my money will not be dictated by outside forces. So I've set up my booth outside. Would you care for a brochure?
Sure thing, sir. I'd planned to interview for my podcast later, but if you don't mind, I suppose I can just get started now?
Oh, that's quite all right.
All right, then. So, during your time in the Walden Pond, you were able to mold an entire philosophy surrounded the nature of individualism, while you were later celebrated for many of your works, such as civil disobedience. People in your life often accused you of underachieving and being a hypocrite. What do you say to this?
My thinking is similar to that of an observer of the common aquarium. Though I may see and understand that which goes on within, I may never see through the inhabiting fish's eyes. However, I have no need, as I am of vastly superior intellect to the metaphorical fish. Indeed, perhaps I did not live up to everyone's ideas of achievement during my lifetime, but it matters not. I thought for myself, instead of drudging through paths already trodden.
And what do you think of Harriet Beecher Stowe's new novel?
Well, I agree with the message, much like my colleague Emerson. As a matter of fact, I am planning on writing some pieces about the matter of slavery myself, maybe even an essay. I'm thinking of titling it Slavery. Quite the creative name, if I do say so myself. Ah! Here comes the convention security to lock me up again. Quickly, I must fly. Goodbye, my dear sir.
Thanks for talking to me, Mr. Thoreau. What an impassioned fellow. Alright, I'm now back inside the convention center. I've wandered over to Edgar Allan Poe's booth. Mr. Poe is back from the dead to join us in this convention. Mr. Poe, we appreciate your dedication. How are you enjoying the conference so far?
It's better than being alone with my thoughts, although social interaction has emotional costs.
That's good to hear. How is your booth doing?
Quite swimmingly, really, though this corner is a bit chilly. All I wanted was a chance to show my poetry to the fans of Poe.
Now, Poe. I know you weren't alive for all the praise, but you're here now from the dead. Some people revere you as one of the founding fathers, so to speak, of American literature. What do you think of this, and how would you describe your writing?
My writing reflects the reality of life, a march through darkness and terror and strife. The Pit and the Pendulum was my favorite piece, and this con is an opportunity for re-release. I don't think I should be revered, although it's better than being jeered, but my work is an expression of humanity's fears, and if that makes me famous, I won't shed a tear.
That's great. Speaking of famous authors, have you seen Mrs. Harriet Beecher Stowe's booth yet? He's just staring blankly at me. Mr. Poe?
Indeed. And have you observed the crowd that is surrounding her? I hope to widen my readership, and for that, Ms. Stowe should give me a tip.
Quite the controversial lady, isn't she? And what have you got in your booth here?
Just a dead raven. It reminds me of all the times I've been rejected by a maiden.
Oh. Well, that's peculiar.
I've become rather accustomed to hearing that phrase. Now then, you have come here to my booth, and many questions have you managed to raise, but only to drag yourself and I into a deeper malaise. Thus, for now, I must say adieu, and we should go our separate ways.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Mr. Poe. Finally, I have been granted the great honor of speaking to the star of this convention, Mrs. Harriet Beecher Stowe. Mrs. Stowe, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling energized and content.
Good to hear. So, I've been hearing that you are the talk of the convention. Everyone at the con wants to speak with you at your booth. Why is that?
Well, it all has to do with my new book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's about an escape of a child and his mother along with an old man named Uncle Tom. Through their escape, I was able to demonstrate the reality of slavery and how Christianity can overcome it.
And how do you think this novel is being influenced by your own background?
Well, my father, Lyman Beecher, was an abolitionist, although I'm quite sure you already knew. Most people know my dear father. And, well, if I think of it, yes, I suppose things might be different. If I had maybe a slave-owning brute for a father, would not allow me to be educated. Parents really shaped the young mind, you know.
It was here that an angry crowd overtook Harriet Beecher Stowe's booth. But not to worry, we'll be right back after a quick message from our sponsors.
This podcast was brought to you by Poe's O's. Put some morning in your morning. Try our new dark chocolate Poe's O's today. This podcast was also brought to you by Henry David Thoreau's mom. She loves her son very much and also hopes that he learns to do his own laundry soon.
Pond 5.
Throughout this episode so far, we've interviewed 4 of the most promising literary figures of America. They're all joining together in this roundtable panel about their works and how to find success as a writer. Mr. Ralph Waldo Emerson will be the moderator. Take a listen.
Thank you all for joining us today. I am joined in this panel by 3 of my friends and fellow writers, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Henry David Thoreau, and Edgar Allan Poe. We wanted to give you all some advice about finding success as a writer. Stowe, would you like to start us off?
Thank you so much, Mr. Emerson. Well, if you visited my booth at this conference, you might know that I've recently published a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's an account about what slavery is actually like. I wrote this because it's deeply relevant in our day and age. Slavery has never been more contentious or more controversial, and as someone who lost a child, I sympathize with how slavery tears apart families. It is our duty as writers to tackle these important issues and to do our part to make social change. And if that makes us famous, I just see it as a means of getting out the right message. So my advice to young writers is to write about an issue that touches your heart and let it guide your path.
Thank you for those thoughtful words, Miss Stowe. I agree that writing about social issues is the best thing to do as a writer. I'm a transcendentalist, so all my writing is centered around individualism. One of my recent works, Civil Disobedience, is about my belief that we all as individuals must stand up against the government when we disagree with its policies. For example, I disagreed with the Mexican-American War, so I refused to pay my taxes until it was resolved. You know, taxation is the real slavery.
Well, actually, slavery is the real slavery, but please continue.
As I was saying, I refused to pay my taxes and was thrown in jail for it. It was a rather enlightening experience, and I was perfectly content within the confines of that prison. I'm sickened by the number of people who passively protest our government without actively resisting it and withdrawing from our corrupt society. So I agree that writing about your progressive ideas is one important way to impact the world as a writer, and it can certainly help you find a wider audience, but it can't be the only thing you do to protest.
Well, unlike my fellow authors and peers, I write not about society, but about its fears. I do not see it as my place to fix the problems of the human race. A writer holds a mirror to the reader, but shouldn't become a political leader. I was one of the first American writers when the canon of literature was a lot tighter. I've tried to create new genre categories so we all can write more interesting stories. It's important for young writers to take less traveled roads, or else we'd all still be stuck writing Shakespeare-style odes. In summary, writers should innovate, but not in the way of changing humanity's fate.
Yes, exactly, precisely. Ah, my good man, your passions are ones close to my bosom indeed. To all of our young listeners, no, to anyone really, it is of the utmost importance that writers write as individuals. For lack of a better word, I cannot stress it enough that they should write as themselves in their respective places in nature and from their own world view. For we are all here. We all exist underneath the Oversoul, each with something, just as each twinkling star brings light to the night sky. We mustn't let the light forever be extinguished. Must not let the morning be its only celebration. The individual holds so much power. Mrs. Stowe is surely an example of that. What is it I heard Abe call her? The little lady who started the war? But one person. And remember, young ones, teach me I am forgotten by the dead, and the dead by herself is forgot. In other words, conformity is death. I should know, I've been in miserable times indeed, trying to conform to the expectations of my family and of society. My dear friend Poe knows a lot about this one. Think for yourself. Be kind. Know you are part of nature. I believe that is all the time we have. I will see you next time, my friends.
And so ended the Great Writers' Con. It was such an honor to hear from these 4 literary giants. Now, that'll conclude this episode. I'm Samuel Scriven for David Buck, and this has been This American Scribe.